Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, January the 8th. And as we like to do on Mondays, we'll be chatting with our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Let me say hello to Bill because we have a lot on the agenda. How are you, Bill?
Oh, reasonably well, Silvio. We missed the big storm here in New York, but I understand upstate they've gotten a more generous donation from the snowman.
Well, I have to tell you something. The next week when we chat, the temperatures for next Monday are projected to be 12 degrees in North Texas. And for
Wow.
several days, we're going to be in the teens. So I
Wow.
guess global warming missed us
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
I mean, it
yes.
just,
On next week's agenda.
right. Yeah. So anyway, but I have to tell you that this is Elvis Presley's birthday. I don't know if that means anything to you, but for a lot of people, that's a big birthday. That's
Yeah.
the big king of rock and roll. Did you ever see him play or
No,
watch him? No?
no. I mean, I saw him on television, but I never saw
Yes.
him in person.
He never
No.
went to the Carson show that I know of. I don't.
That not when I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he did. They kept him, as I've read in his, not in his biography per se, but as I read about Elvis, they protected him a lot. They didn't want to overexpose him.
Yeah.
So they made that movie every year and a few hit records, and they really protected him. They didn't want to saturate the market with Elvis. They figured that they were getting enough money and enough attention with what they were doing, so why change it?
It's an interesting story because he died at a very young age.
Did
I don't
42?
42. Well,
Yeah.
they didn't protect him enough from something.
Well, he had I guess I'm not an expert, but I mean, you read stuff, and as I understand, the last couple of years of his life, addictions really got to him.
Yes, yeah.
Because when you look at the pictures at the end, and you see pictures just a few years before, it did like two different people.
Yes, that's right.
It's two different people. So I guess he's a good lesson of what addictions can do for
Oh,
somebody.
without any question.
I mean, destroying a career at age 42, it's pretty bad. Well, Bill, there is a story, the defense secretary, and I have to tell you that I have never seen anything like this before. Maybe you have, I don't know, but the defense secretary apparently gets ill, which is, we hope for a speedy recovery. We're not making fun of him as far as that. We hope he recovers. They take him to the hospital, and apparently, as I understand, the chief of staff was also sick. So nobody told President Biden. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting here going, wait a minute. This is not the Secretary of Transportation, with all due respect, or the Secretary of Labor, with all due respect. This is one of the two or three people that would be on the phone with President Biden if there was a true emergency, Bill.
That's absolutely correct. I don't get it. We don't know enough facts. It could be something. There could be nothing here. I mean, it could be that he told somebody to tell the White House, and that person forgot. I mean, something as simple as that. But usually, I mean, if the Secretary of Defense is unavailable for 3 days, somebody knows about it. I mean, it may look. This may be something embarrassing that came up, or that he doesn't want to talk about. But it certainly the image of it is not good.
No, and as I said, anything medical, we sympathize with him. People get sick. I mean, that's just a reality. People are going to get sick. They're going to go to the hospital, and that's just the way life is. But when you're the Secretary of Defense, I guess you getting sick is a bigger problem than you and I, Bill.
Well, sure, and if his chief of staff was also unavailable, that's a bad picture. It's a bad image, especially because we are involved in so many areas right now around the world, and uh, in a very bad way. The pressure is on the United States, and that pressure is going to be felt more and more as the days go on. We have a president who is not particularly serious, or not taken seriously by a lot of our foreign enemies, and then the Secretary of Defense disappears for a few days. Just Biden ought to call his cabinet together and say, do we have to take attendance every morning?
Right. That's right. Yeah, we're gonna have to put everybody on Zoom and take attendance every morning.
Right.
Yeah, right. No. That's a great line, but you're right. You're right. I mean, I've never. Now there are people, and maybe this is just partisanship, but there are people who are saying that it didn't occur to anyone to call the president because I guess nobody takes him seriously. That's a very sinister way of looking at it.
Yes, it is.
But
And I'm sorry to say it may be true.
yes, well,
Um,
that's the frightening part. But here you have I mean, the president of the United States doesn't know. Uh, I mean, it's just I've never seen anything like it, Bill.
no,
You couldn't do a movie like this.
no.
They reject
Although
the script.
yes, although let's go back to the era of Franklin Roosevelt. The American people were never told that Roosevelt was paralyzed, and the press went along with it. Now, there was some indication in some stories about him that he had polio or infantile paralysis, but no photographs were allowed of the president in his wheelchair. And in fact, one time a photographer did try to take the picture, and a reporter standing next to him smashed his camera
Mm.
because that was an agreement between the press and the White House. So, in a way, there was some similarity there that the president was a sicker man than we thought he was, Mr. Roosevelt, and yet the public was not allowed to know the extent of it. That was also true of Jack Kennedy,
Hmm.
who was not completely truthful with the public about what he had, and we're not permitted to know. I don't recall any incident like this where a man is actually missing
Right,
for
right,
3 days, but we have had attempts at deception before.
right. No, that's true. What about you? Probably remember this. I don't. But what about when President Eisenhower had his heart attack? Was that pretty well covered?
Oh yes, thoroughly covered, and if I recall correctly, there was some provision made for the time he was under anesthesia. I don't recall if the amendment covering
No,
that
the
that had
25th
been.
Amendment didn't happen until 67, 10 years
Yeah,
later.
so they would have had to have made some arrangement. Now, of course, obviously, in the case of the president dying, the vice president takes over automatically. There was a gap in the law that what if the president was just, under the influence of anesthesia or unavailable? What happens then? That was taken care of by the 25th Amendment. But yes, everyone knew about Eisenhower's heart attack. And in fact, it was used as a campaign issue in 1956 by Adlai Stevenson. It was used gently, but it was brought up.
Yeah. But I don't remember any others. I know, for example, when President Reagan was being operated, when I think President Bush, George W. Bush, had an operation too, and they had Cheney. Cheney was the acting president for half a day or something. And it even happened with President Biden. Kamala Harris was acting president for a few hours. So things like that have happened, but we know about them. I mean, the chain of command isn't broken,
No.
or it's not disrupted, I should say. But in this case, I mean, you have, I can just imagine. I mean, it's the president. There's an emergency, and the phone is ringing, and the president says, "Well, where's Lloyd, the
Yes.
secretary?"
Yeah.
And they say, "Well, we don't know."
That would be an interesting moment at the White House. It really would. Um, Although Kamala Harris would probably say, "Lloyd, who?"
That's right. That's right. Yeah, she would probably say Lloyd. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I didn't know we had a Lloyd in the
You're
inner
right.
circle. He never introduced himself to me,
Right.
or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, and now of course now you're getting into the political side of this, and of course it was only a matter of time before the race card was involved,
Well, of course.
and now you have, I think, our Sheila Jackson here of Houston saying that, well, that's because he's a black man. Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's like the plagiarism up in Harvard. I guess
That's right. Yes.
plagiarism is because she's a black woman. Forget the fact that she had, as president, has a responsibility to enforce
The
plagiarism
plagiarism
rules.
rules. That's right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but nevertheless, it's always the race card. I've never seen anything like this. You're having some people call for his resignation. I think that the wisest thing, or the best way to satisfy the American people that adults are running this thing, is for the secretary to say, "Look, I made a mistake. This was a horrible thing, and I'm resigning. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President, and
Yeah.
I'm moving on." I think that would be the best way to reestablish credibility, Bill.
Yeah, that is certainly a good way. Or he could just say, "Look, I messed up. I didn't wasn't I gave an order to notify the White House. It was not followed. I take responsibility for that." It was something, I think the story will go away in a couple of days and he'll
Sure.
stay on. But it is a very, very odd event. I've always wondered. I mean, if the enemy is reading us correctly, and we have to take some military action, whether they could prevent it by something like this, a disruption of the U.S. government. It's something that I think we ought to be concerned about.
Well, I think so. I mean, this is serious business. I never see this when you're talking about the Secretary of Defense and national security problem. I've never seen it as Republican or Democrat. I
Right.
think it's the country.
I
I
agree.
mean, the soldiers who are serving the country, who I guess work for the Secretary of Defense. Well, of course, the president, but through the Secretary of Defense. These are young men from every part of the country, from every ideology, and I think they deserve better. That's just my feeling.
I agree with you. And I think it's something that they feel down in the ranks when things are messed up above.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, speaking of messes,
Yes.
President Biden gave the opening salvo, or I guess shot the opening salvo, whatever the expression is, of the campaign. And I thought it was embarrassing. I mean, it was nothing but, I didn't do anything, but my gosh, that other fellow is going to destroy the country if
He's
he
gonna
gets back in.
yes,
It's
yes.
unbelievable.
I yes, they don't speak like adults. I mean, he can just say, I see a better way forward for the country, and I don't think we need Trump's this, Trump's that. But he just look, he's not a great campaigner. The last time they kept him in the basement of his house, and he barely did any campaigning. And here he is 4 years later in a much worse situation physically, and there he's out on the campaign trail. I suspect they will allow him to make a few speeches and then put him away, and obviously refuse to debate.
Right. Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
he's not going to debate, so they'll put him away the last time, and then run commercials and hope the commercials work.
Right. No, that's it. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We may have the first campaign without a debate. I guess I guess 76 is the first one. Well, of course, Kennedy, Nixon in 60, and then it
Yes,
went dark until 76 with Carter and Ford, and we've had them ever since. But all of a sudden here, we may have one. I don't see how he can debate, Bill. I mean, if you put Trump and Biden, let's say, on the stage, or Trump and
oh,
really Biden and anybody, even a Democrat, I don't see how he can debate. I don't see how his energy
that's
can
right.
keep up with 30 minutes or 45 minutes of a segment, Bill.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's probably 100% chance that sometime during that debate, where if he's permitted to appear, that he will mess up very badly, and and his problem will come back to him again.
Well, he'll say that he attended all these funerals for the police officers who were killed on January the 6th. Well, there weren't any
Yes,
police officers killed on
that's right.
January the 6th. There was one policeman who died,
Yes,
but I mean, that was the next day, I believe, and it was a heart
yes,
attack. So it had nothing to do with what happened that day. He talked about all these thousands of people who've been arrested on January the 6th. I really don't know the numbers for sure, but I don't think it was thousands of people who were
no,
arrested. And to my knowledge, not one of them has been charged with insurrection, Bill.
that's right. No, well, he apparently feels they have to come out with some explanation. And he is trying to prove that he's as healthy as anybody else, which he is not. It's perfectly evident that he is not. See, my belief is this problem started much earlier. We should have, under law in the United States, a provision that anybody who is on a national ticket needs to go through a full physical and cognitive examination, the kind that you would give to any executive, to any good member of your family, and that it should be a medical panel that's neutral, from Walter Reed or Bethesda Naval Hospital, and they will give a complete report. And I think that it would be a better presidency if we had that provision, because we would at least have some minimal guarantee that the president is healthy.
Yeah, some objective assessment of the man's mental state or physical state. I remember, Bill, maybe you do as well, when Thomas Eagleton was taken off the ticket
Yes.
back in 1972. And as I recall, it had something to do with some mental problems that he had had or some medical treatment. And he was taken off the ticket. I mean, there was a huge scandal, as I recall, Bill.
Yeah, there was because the scandal involved electromagnetic or electronic therapy, where they put a current through your head or through your brain, and he did not reveal it at the time of his nomination. I don't think that Sergeant Shriver, Sergeant Shriver succeeded him. I don't think that the candidate for president, who was George McGovern, knew anything about it,
Right.
and he wound up on the ticket, and then had to leave the ticket and be replaced by Sergeant Shriver. But that's why I call for a full examination by a panel of doctors. Look, they can't guarantee anything. He could be healthy one day and unhealthy the next, but at least we won't have that situation that we have now. I consider this disgraceful. I think, we're talking about the presidency of the United States. It's the most important job in the world. And I think we have a right to have a president who doesn't have mental lapses.
No, I agree. I think it's only fair. I mean, the American people deserve that. But I do remember reading there was a book that came out by Theodore White called The Making of the President in 1972. I remember reading that.
Yes.
It's a great book. Well, there were several books that he wrote like that.
They all were called The Making of the President.
Yeah, exactly. And 72 is the one I'm talking about now. And there's a great part of that book where George McGovern says, "I am 1,000% behind Thomas Eagleton."
Yes.
And then, of course, poor Eagleton was off the ticket shortly after. And the reason I mention this is because I just heard, well, President Biden didn't say I'm 1,000% behind, General Austin, but he came pretty close to saying something like that.
Yes.
And so you sometimes, when you hear this absolute support, you sometimes wonder what's going to happen next, Bill.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a statement of today. Today is Monday. Tomorrow there'll be a different statement. Circumstances have changed. The president was briefed this morning and got new information. And he will be visiting the Secretary of Defense and giving him
Right.
flowers. But the new Secretary of Defense will be, anybody from a group that we need.
That's right. Well, they already have a woman who's the deputy, who is the Deputy Secretary of Defense, or at least they can play that game with identity politics. But here's the other thing too, going back to the secretary for a second. The deputy secretary was vacationing in Puerto Rico, and she apparently wasn't told about it either.
No.
Which is amazing to me.
And she apparently was not considered to be an important person in a week when we escalated our attacks in Syria and other places. It seems to be a rather leisurely administration.
It is. I heard a general, Bill, at lunchtime. I was watching Fox News at lunchtime, and I heard a general who came on. I think his last name is Kellogg, like the cereal company.
Keith Kellogg.
Yes. And he came on and he was asking what I thought was a pretty interesting question. He said, who approved the strike on Iraq, on that attack that we just had? It was in, I guess, people who were in Iraq, not against the Iraqi government, but against terrorists. Mm-hmm. And who approved that? Because when that strike occurred, he was in the hospital. So who approved it? And, the explanation is, well, it had been pre-approved or sort of approved before. But the general was saying that that's not the way it works. No. That usually you approve them and then you don't say, with some time say, okay, look, if they attack us, we're going to attack them. That's usually not how it works. I'm completely out of step here because I don't know the rules. But the general was asking who approved this attack. If the deputy the deputy was in Puerto Rico on vacation, completely disconnected, who approved it? And the chief is, it's crazy. I don't know.
Sure. Well, it would have to be the president. I mean, the president has to approve any attack anyway.
Right. So the president
It's
would ask, "Where's Lloyd? I got a
Lloyd,
question for him."
that is the interesting thing. I hadn't thought of that. That we did have an attack, did make an attack during this period, and somebody maybe said, "Oh, Lloyd is for it," or something. That I just spoke to Lloyd.
That's right.
He's at Disney World.
Right. No, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, but I can just see the phone call or whatever comes into the. Of course, the president was on vacation too when this was happening. But I mean, look, presidents can approve things obviously when they're on vacation. I mean, Reagan did when
Yeah.
he was on vacation, and I'm
Oh,
sure others have
a
too.
vacation means nothing because they have all that electronic equipment
Right.
that they take with them.
But apparently, the deputy did not have that with her. That's the other scary part. The
Yes,
deputy was in Puerto Rico, and she didn't have something standing by in case of an emergency. So that, I mean, this whole thing is crazy. I just don't know how to explain it, but I do think somebody has to be held accountable.
well,
That's
absolutely.
my
Look,
feeling.
every member of the chain of command has to have the right equipment on a vacation or anytime once you take the oath. And I don't know what if she had. Maybe her equipment is only a classified, a secure cell phone. I don't know.
I don't know. The whole thing is absolutely crazy. But getting back to President Biden's speech, he also spoke today. I understand he went
Yes,
to a church where there had been a
a shooting.
incident, I guess,
Yeah,
in 2015, and once again they blame it on Trump, even though Trump at the time had barely come down the elevator bill.
that's right. Well, of course, look, everything is going to be Trump's fault, and this is an attack on our democracy. And if he criticizes the Secretary of the Interior, I don't know how this can go on and still have a democratic country to allow him to do that. I mean, it's such an absurd discussion. It really is. It really is. It's an insult to the American people. But look, it worked for the Democrats before, and maybe it'll work again. I don't know. But the whole idea that Trump is an assailant toward our democracy is ridiculous. He has a record. He was president for 4 years. If they think he did anything during those 4 years that was a threat to our democracy, say so. But just don't say that in the future he'll be a threat to democracy.
Right. Yeah. Be specific. Tell us how he was a threat to democracy. I was critical of many things that Trump said, his style at times, but I never felt that the democracy was threatened. And the best evidence of it is that he left the presidency on the 20th of January
That's
and
right.
and went to Florida. So I mean, for a man who was supposed to be so power hungry, in the end he couldn't he couldn't keep the job any longer than the Constitution calls for it,
That's
Bill.
exactly right. I think that the idea that he was that power hungry itself was a ridiculous idea. The man he's a mature adult. He knew he had lost, or at least under the rules he had lost, and he left. He left. He didn't try to hold on to power. It's ridiculous. How could you hold on to power? I mean,
Yeah, on what basis
yes,
is he gonna call the army and say, "Hey, I want to stay on," and
yeah,
the army is gonna say, "Wait a minute, you don't even have a phone anymore," you
that's
know?
right.
You,
At
you,
that
you and that happens actually.
at midnight, midday on that day, I think it's midday. You become president, and that's it, with or without the oath.
That's it. You're exactly right. Well, Bill, let's talk a little bit about the wonderful city of New York. Now they're suing bus companies for
Yes,
bringing migrants. And I don't know if you saw Governor Abbott on Fox News Sunday yesterday. I thought he was really good in explaining the lawsuit and this thing about the buses. But basically, he said, how is it illegal to take somebody to New York who wants to go to New York, who signed a letter saying, I consent to go? I mean, where's the illegality of this, Bill?
well, that I think is a very, very big question, and we may have to rewrite some of the laws dealing with transition to power, making them absolutely specific. That might be necessary, but the fact is that in all of American history, we have never had a real problem with a presidential transition.
Right.
And you can imagine some circumstances under which members of a president's staff might want to, in a way, succeed him in office by torpedoing the new president. That probably has happened a few times. But the transition itself, no serious person has ever questioned who the president is.
Right.
It's just they start these big press discussions and they get some ratings, but they're not going anywhere.
That's right. And what do you think of the mayor suing the bus companies, Bill?
Well, I think that's the mayor of Chicago, actually, who I think New York may have some lawsuits in as well. But it's silly. They brought this on themselves. Now they're trying to blame the bus companies. They brought this entirely on themselves by declaring themselves sanctuary cities without ever giving a thought to what that actually means in real life.
Right. They never thought people would actually take them up on it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, that's the problem of liberalism. Don't ask any questions. We've done it already.
That's right. But as I understand, there are so many thousands in New York City. I was watching an interview the other day with a business owner who just one of the many small business owners there in New York City, these merchants or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was saying how these migrants are coming into your business asking for money or asking for something for free because they don't have any money. We've brought 6.5 million people into the country without any kind of work papers or work permits, that is. These people cannot work. We're encouraging them basically to work under the table because that's the only option they have to support themselves. And we've done all of this in the most chaotic and disorderly way, Bill, that it could have been done. It's crazy.
Well, when you add to that things like the evacuation from Afghanistan, and you wonder if this administration is capable of doing anything well.
Well, I think you're right. But I mean, this, bringing, and again, when I see these things, I have to compare it to our experience because we came here, as you know. My parents came here when I was a kid back in the 60s. And when we came here, the minute we entered the country, we had already been approved. And then we went through the paperwork at whatever.
Mhm.
And then as soon as that was finished, the next day or the day after, my father could work.
Yes.
So
Yes.
my father, I think we did get an airplane ticket or something like that to go to Wisconsin, but that wasn't really the government. That was actually a charity that paid for that. But the point I'm making is that my father could work the next
Yes.
day or the day after.
And
So
he wanted to.
He wanted to. And I'm sure, to be honest, I think a lot of these people want to work as well. But
Yes.
but they don't, we've brought them in the most irrational way that now we have all these people here. I was watching, I think it was Henry Cuellar saying the other day that 80% of them are going to be rejected in their asylum request because they're either economic refugees or they don't fit the definition of political asylum. So these people, most of them are going to be told you got to go back. But how do they go back? I mean, where do they go back to?
There's no mechanism for it.
Right.
And it's the whole thing with the border is a complete disgrace. It is nothing more than an attempt to pack the nation full of potential voters for the Democratic Party. But when you read the list of countries that they come from, this was not the idea. I mean, some have come from Vietnam, some have come from Iran, some have come from other Asian nations like China. I mean, I agree with those people who dread the possibility of a terrorist attack by some of the people we've let in ourselves.
It's not the usual places we get refugees from.
No.
And this is, of course, my point with Mexico. Mexico over the years had no problems with Mexicans coming over because those Mexicans would come over, work, and send money back.
Yes.
So at least there was some benefit to Mexico in that. And even though it was illegal what they were doing, it was not chaotic, Bill.
That's exactly. Yes.
They would basically come into the country, get connected with some kind of a network. They'd be washing dishes, cutting grass, doing something, working, and sending $100 to their mom.
Yes.
But it was not chaotic. Most of them would stay away from trouble. I mean, they were basically scared to death to tell you who they were because they were in the country without papers. But it was not chaotic.
No.
What we have right now, it's totally chaotic.
Well, it's totally chaotic. And what you have now is blatant dishonesty, and blatant law breaking by the President of the United States. I mean, he took an oath of office, and he is violating that oath. There's no question about it. And very frankly, I think this is one of the greatest scandals I've seen in my lifetime. And the potential for real damage to the United States is so great. And that is not being talked about by the most of the network commentators by a few,
No,
yes.
not at all. And there's a cartoon or story in Babylon Bee, of course, the humor newspaper, saying that the DOJ is suing Texas for wanting to enforce the laws that the Congress passed.
Yes.
It's pretty
The absurdity in Washington is so great, and what makes that absurdity possible is the negligence of the press. If the press was doing its job, a lot of these things would not be happening because
oh,
people would not
absolutely.
be able to get away with them.
Absolutely. Oh, there's no question about it. They'd be asking questions,
Oh, of course.
or at the very least, they would be demanding answers. I mean, we now have a president, as you know, who doesn't do press conferences. Well, the press should be demanding press
Yes.
conferences. They should be saying, well, if he cannot do it, put the vice president out there and do it.
Well, or something. I remember when President Kennedy was in office, and he was asked after the Bay of Pigs, whose fault is this? And he said, I am the responsible officer of the government. We had a completely different notion of responsibility in those days. The president took responsibility.
Right. You're right. Well, Bill, another story that I like to get your reaction to is the statue or monument to William Penn in Pennsylvania has just been removed or is
Yes.
about to be removed. And they're doing it in the name of
Indigenous peoples.
indigenous people,
Yes.
which I sent you that article by Jonathan Turley, and he was basically saying you can do both.
Of course you can.
You can honor William Penn for his contributions to the nation, and you can, honor the Native Americans for, and maybe in some cases for getting a bad deal. But you can do both. You don't have to destroy William Penn.
No, but
order-
the element that is in control of the Department of Interior is very left wing, and this is the kind of thing they do. And I think they think it's going to help him win the election.
I think this is going to hurt him in Pennsylvania because
I think it will too.
Because Jonathan Turley was saying that they're going to change the name of the state to Transylvania.
You're right.
And take the pen away.
yes.
Because I mean,
and
it's
add the trans people.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
And but I mean, if you eliminate William Penn as the founder of Pennsylvania, then I guess you're going to have to change the name as well, and change the name of the university, and change the name of Penn State, and all the other universities that have that name. I mean, this is so crazy.
It's silly. It really is, and it's childlike.
It is. Well, no, but I think you're right. I don't think the public goes for this.
No, not at all. Every survey has shown that.
Yes.
And I hope there's a real backlash in Pennsylvania.
I hope so too. There should be. I mean, part of their heritage has just been replaced. Okay, one last one here, Bill. I wanted to get your reaction. I just saw this at lunchtime again. They're blocking bridges in New York and tunnels.
Very bad.
And that is making a lot of people very angry. In fact, I saw a scene or video of a guy getting out of the car and getting into a pushing, I guess, and pushing one of the protesters off. Somebody's going to get killed, Bill. If the police doesn't intervene here, or the National Guard doesn't intervene, I don't know where the governor of New York is, but she should be sending the National Guard and saying, you're not blocking the bridge, period.
Yes, well, absolutely. This is not only an illegal act, as you pointed out, it's a dangerous and illegal act. I mean, an ambulance might not be able to get through, or an ambulance trying to get through, or fire engine can hit some of the protesters inadvertently. But I fully agree with you. This is a tragedy waiting to happen. It is also amazing that these so-called protesters don't realize how much they're hurting their own cause and why that doesn't bother them.
Well, they're living in another planet.
Yes.
It's like the people who walk into a museum and, damage a beautiful painting because they want to protest fossil fuels. And I'm going, I'm sitting there going, you're not making a lot of friends when you're doing that.
No, you're not. I think if they want to protest, they could have an area set aside for protests where they don't interfere with traffic, don't interfere with other people living their lives, and exercise their First Amendment rights. But this is not in the First Amendment. And what
No,
is so sad is the silence on the left, just the silence on the left.
right.
Instead of saying we could do this another way, they're either supporting them or remaining silent.
You know, I
And
was thinking you could put him in Yankee Stadium. There's probably enough room there,
oh yes,
or in Shea State. Well, not Shea Stadium, City Field, they call it now. You could
yes.
put him in one of these ballparks and just let them air it out. You know, just have 5 or 6 hours of protest, and they can do whatever they want to do, and the media can still cover them, but they're not affecting the people of New York. I mean, somebody's going to get killed, and it could very well be somebody in an ambulance
That's exactly
who
right.
doesn't get to the hospital on time. That's
That's
the thing that worries me.
That is exactly right. Or it could be somebody, a member of a family who is trying to get home to a sick relative and doesn't make it on time. I mean, it is completely negative, and there's nothing positive about it.
No.
I don't
And what
think
is the mayor saying, Bill?
I. I don't. I've been waiting for him to make a comment. I may have missed it, but I don't think he's saying anything. I mean, he wants the Hamas vote. You know, there's a big Hamas vote in New York. The,
Well, isn't there a big Jewish vote too? Maybe they cancel each other.
Well,
I don't know.
well, I don't know. Given the way things are in America today, they'll probably not allow them to vote.
Well, that might be coming, unfortunately, or it's not coming, but a suggestion being made to take them off the ballot in the name of Palestine or in the name of Gaza.
Yes.
Take all the Jewish candidates off the ballot in the name of Gaza or something.
I imagine that's going to come.
Yeah, eventually
it gets that crazy.
It does. Well, Bill, I want to thank you as always for joining us, and thank you so much for your input. And I wonder what crazy thing will happen next week. I wonder what member of the cabinet will be gone for a few days. Now, I know Secretary of Transportation has been gone for a couple of years, but nobody has to be missing him. So I don't think anybody cares where he is, Bill.
Well, there could be a few others who go AWOL and don't tell anybody. And we'll have to have some good explanations. I think that some of the gossip columnists may tell the administration, we need a juicier explanation. You know, what's her name?
Right.
You know?
What's her name, or what does he really have?
Exactly.
What does he really have? Well, Bill, have a great week, and we'll chat next time.
Same to you, Silvio. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Our good friend, Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda, talking about a lot of issues. This story about the Secretary of Transportation the Secretary of Defense is absolutely crazy. That's all I can tell you. Have a great day. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll get together the next time. Thank you.